I'm Keith. You know who I am.
Yep.
I'm our recruiter here at Styer. This is our first initial break check with Styer Transportation. We're doing a podcast Zoom call, and we'll put it on YouTube, and then we'll send it out to our team. So I'm envisioning something where it's like a water cooler, where there's a conversation here around the industry, a place for Styer and some of our professionals have a chance to comment and talk about changes in current events. And today I'm happy to introduce our guest. Our first guest is Skip Foster, my mentor for a number of years and still is. He's an industry professional who has over 50 years of experience in and around trucking, from owning assets and running a truck line, Freedom Express in the upper Midwest, and also in a brokerage with Freedom Lines. And then, of course, he's done so much with the MTA, calling the capital, and he's got so many contacts in and around the industry. So just a wealth of knowledge for me in my life, going back to when I was a little pup. And of course, Skip, he's been in it forever with his dad too. His dad was long in this industry as well, as far as driver goes, and so a wealth of information again. So I'd like to thank Skip for taking some time to fuddle through the technical issues this morning and join me for a quick conversation. So today I'd like to talk about a couple of topics. I think this last year we've all been impacted by COVID-19. So I want to talk a little bit about that and just get his take on some things. And then technology. There's a lot of technology in our business, and I know Skip to be on the forefront of some of that and always reading different periodicals, and he's very in tune with some of that. And if we got a little bit of time, we'll touch on DOT regulations. Nothing fun, but there's always changes there. And I thought with the changing of administrations, there might be something to talk about that way. So I'll start with the first question to Skip. You know, in talking about COVID, it was a challenging year for us in transportation. We've never been more essential. Toilet paper was flying off the shelves and such. So what changes do you see coming up in this next year with COVID and trucking and transportation in 2021?
Well, one of the questions is, will we get back to normal? My short answer is no. If you're looking at normal as defined as pre-COVID, no, there'll be a lot of changes. We've seen a lot of industries hit hard, leisure, hospitality. I think remote conferencing is here to stay. I think remote working is here to stay. I don't know at what percentage of a workday. Now, hopefully what will happen in the trucking industry is that will translate to less traffic.
I've heard that from a number of drivers. Initially in April and May, there was quite a bit of a
couple of months of lockdown. Yeah. So, and you know, it'll just ripple down from that. Hopefully, then we'll be safer, less little fender benders. So I don't know what the new normal is going to be post-COVID. For the trucking industry, I think it'll be positive. I think there was, as far as geographically, I think there was a push because of the driver shortage to reduce the length of haul, get the DCs closer, go to a 500-mile distance in most industries. I think that has been pushed by e-commerce. I think COVID pushed e-commerce. So it'll be interesting. I think we'll continue to see DCs sprout up. Again, that'll be driven by e-commerce. At some point, you've got to take advantage of transportation economies of scale and move a truckload to the DCs and then go with the last mile. Last mile, I think will change more than what we're going to see in the over-the-road and the truckload business. So that I think is the first thing concerning COVID. I think as far as what specific truck lines will do, I think we had a hit in those carriers that were focusing on food service, but the upscale was people still had to eat, so it went into the retail market. So I know that in talking to a number of people, their food service business is down, but the retail is up. Therefore, it's a net zero. I think the housing market's going to boom. I think people, being how they're going to office and live in their house, they're not going to do it from the basement. They're not going to do it from the bedroom. They're going to want an office. And the millennials, was a good piece in Trucking Minnesota this month concerning the millennials. And so I think that the housing will increase. Again, it depends on what you haul. So, foodstuffs has been somewhat safe over the years. And I think it'll continue to be. So that's basically my take on COVID. I can't wait till it's over.
Yeah, it's been entirely disruptive for a lot of facets. The restaurant industry has been impacted greatly. The fitness industry, Styer does a fair bit of fitness equipment. I know in March and April that was impacted initially. It's rebounded quite a bit though, and of course now they want new equipment and clean equipment, and I mean there's a lot of change. And I think that's one thing. Is we will still continue to see change. I know with the new administration, they're making a mask mandate for flights and stuff. So that's going to be one of those things too, where there will be an evolution. But I think most of our guys are pretty well used to the hand sanitizing, the mask wearing, keeping their social distance. A lot of that has become pretty standard for a lot of us. So I've seen, a few drivers coming back to the industry. Being essential and always having work to do, some industries and some folks have gotten away from their accounting job or whatever they're doing, and more people are gravitating towards this industry. Can you think of any best practices or advice to give a new driver walking into trucking? We occasionally will hire a driver who's got a year's worth of experience or a little bit less than 5-10 years. So can you think of anything that we could tell a new driver that to be aware of in this industry while working around some of these issues?
Well, there's a few things I think that are very important. I think from a driver's standpoint, he's got to be a workhorse, not a racehorse. Learn how to be productive every hour. Take a steady pace. The example is years ago, the driving that I did, you would see a driver pass you 3 times in 100 miles, go like a bat out of hell in the left-hand lane. Problem is he passed you 3 times in 100 miles, okay? And by the end of the day, the guy in the right-hand lane was well ahead of him at destination. And so all you do with speed is increase exposure to accidents, period. Learn how to work steady is important. I think you also have to be understanding of your circadian rhythm. One of the best things that happened in the early 2000s, we got on a 24-hour clock. Prior to that, we were on an 18-hour clock. I saw nothing but problems. So you've got to learn to work with your circadian rhythm. That kind of goes to play with the workhorse theory instead of the racehorse theory. And the third thing to those coming back into the business or the first timers is remember you have a sedentary job. Okay. The good news is, bad news is you still don't move and get the proper exercise. You know the story of my father, and you know the story of Freedom Express. When my father received a number of safety awards, and upon analyzing what he did, he was a short haul driver. He was home every night. He'd run 500 miles a night, home every day, excuse me, and in trailers. So every 2 to 3 hours, he got exercise. And that's what today's driver needs to do. He doesn't need to take a half hour off. Some people may, okay. but most people need to stop at that rest every 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Just walk around the truck. I don't care if you kick's very important. Another thing you have to do, and there's a lot of aids and apps on this, is plan your trip. Keith, you were around. You didn't know the Neo Fosters, but you knew the Bill Snyders. Okay, and Bill would plan his trip, and he would, if it was a 10-hour day, he'd put in an extra hour, hour and a half, knowing something could happen. And the guy who's in the left-hand lane going like a bat out of hell, he's the guy that should have left 20 minutes earlier, okay? Because he's trying to catch it up. So plan that trip. So those are the 4 things that I think are important from a safety driver standpoint.
I really appreciate that. That's when we talk about our training with some of our new guys, we know we're all playing beat the clock. And so what tricks can you do to help your future self out? Like I always say, if you could park at the consignee and sit on your hours, well, you're going to be 30 minutes further than that other guy who's at the fuel stop, gets his day started, the clock started. And so that's how you win, right? That's how you maximize your productivity in your work week. So good. I appreciate your thoughts on COVID and all that way. So technology, that's our next topic. There's a lot of changing technology. Drivers are in these trucks with automatics these days. I've heard numbers like 80% of the trucks you see on the road are automatics. I think that's just the way it is. There's a lot of technology, sensors, hard braking indicators, event recorders, many safety features to help the driver with being alert, lane departure, etc. Quite a lot of changes. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the changes you've seen over your time? I know your dad used to drive a cab over, right? What would he think today?
Yeah. Well, and Freedom Express started with a number of cab overs. So, and that depends on your regulation. The reason we had cab overs was to comply with link laws. And so you had to have 55 feet bumper to bumper. And so you had a 40-foot trailer, a big 40-foot trailer. And so you had to comply with the laws. Finally, in 1980, with the Surface Act, we were able to cut the noses off of those, or put the noses back on those cab overs. Cab overs were tough. They were a rough ride. They probably had an average cost of 15 to 20% more than a conventional because of the pounding, because of the tilt cab, the extra hydraulics. So there was a lot more maintenance to them. We in the trucking industry are a product of regulation. We have to comply, and we're very flexible in that. I don't know of anybody that is an outlaw trucker. I mean, they're out there. Luckily, I don't know them. We comply. We're given a nervous. Yeah, the bull haulers, they're a different breed, and I had a couple of them over the years, and they were hard to retrain. It was in their DNA, go. And I've got thoughts on that, but that's a bigger issue, and I don't want to take on the meat industry at this point.
No.
Yeah, but. We are a product of the regulation, and we've got to make the best of it. So, yes, some of the transformations we had when I started, we didn't have an air ride seat. Some of our vehicles weren't power steering. If you had to back a trailer in with a cab over, you had too much weight on the steering axle, you literally had to stand to turn the steering wheel, literally. So the power steering is a safety feature. Air conditioning, to reduce the fatigue. That wasn't around when I started. When I sold the assets, it was still an expense. It wasn't quite the expense that it was in the 60s and early 70s. I think that the trucking industry and the commercial side will advance this technology and take advantage of the research and development faster than the passenger car. And the reason for it is that they should be able to identify an instant return on investment. Okay? Is it good or bad? Now, the large carriers are going to have the ability to test that. Smaller carriers are going to have the ability to read the pros and cons of what the big carriers did, the good and the bad. Throw out the bad, keep the good. Okay, so let them do the research and development.
The heavy lifting.
But it will come about. We have to take care of the driver comfort. We didn't have air ride seats or even air ride suspensions.
Well, look at APUs.
Now,
APUs are standard these days.
Yeah, so those things, they all increase fatigue. I'll get in the next segment. The biggest thing that has helped the industry, and I'm not fast forwarding here, is the interstate system. Yeah. That's increased productivity, it's increased safety. Look at the miles compared to the 50s and 60s prior to it. I think some of the innovations that as you know, I work with MnDOT and the automated vehicle committees, and I'm very interested in getting up and going the vehicle to vehicle so that we can have computers on both vehicles talk to each other. I think it has to happen. We have to monitor the blind spots. It's very, very important. I envisioned, I couldn't put it together, but I envisioned this thing to have not only backup cameras on tractor trailers, but door cameras that you can link into when you're backing into a tight door. Now, that's going to be on the receiver side. He's going to have to prove his ROI, and his ROI might mean that Styer wants to go to a receiver that helps that to help not knock off the door. Okay.
No question.
So those are some of the things that I see. The parking apps are getting, they're new. It used to be in the 50s and 60s that you took a quick power nap in a wide spot of a road. Okay. If it was a wide spot, you just pulled over. Well, now we call them rest areas, and we've evolved, and sometimes there's an opening, sometimes they're not. The industry is addressing it, but that kind of goes back to your plan your day. So if you know you're going to Chicago, and if you hit there at 6 o'clock, you're in trouble. If you hit there at 5 in the morning, you got some smoother sailing.
I don't disagree.
So use the apps that are available, use the history of when the congestion starts. I think the biggest thing that will come about, that I'd like to see come about, is the increased telematics. Again, I envision a day, I remember in the early 90s, we had our first electronic devices on engines, and it was a headache. We had issues. We have issues all the time. And then we got into the late 90s, and we would have sensors that went bad and shut you down. I envision the telematics function to create a backup so that, like an aircraft, you got two systems. So when the telematics senses that, well, the crankshaft sensor is going bad, it goes to a backup to keep you running until you can get to a shop. Okay? I can see that coming. One of the things that we developed drivers with in the 50s and 60s is we pulled them out of the farming industry and the construction industry during the summer. And they had some knowledge of mechanics.
Yeah.
And they don't have them today, but I'm not sure they're needed. Okay. Everything has gotten better. So,
yeah, sometimes you can't identify what's wrong with it unless you plug a computer into that truck, right?
Right. And I think the day will come that's already there going down the road with telematics.
I understand. That is truly next level for sure. And I think we'll see more cameras being utilized as mirrors like you described with backing up and the sides, and
Yep.
will be more heads-up displays, I'm sure of it. So a lot of changes in technology coming forward for the whole industry. Let's talk a little bit about regulations.
We've got to remember with technology that the private sector will outpace the public sector. Technology will advance quicker than our government will react to try to I won't say control. My political affiliation, not so much control, but I guess protect everybody.
But on the private sector, you look at what Elon Musk is doing. I mean, Teslas are all over. He's planning on putting people on Mars in 5 years. I mean, I agree. The private sector is going to advance that pretty quick, the technology. So ever changing. Any other thoughts on regulations here with the new administration? Is Biden going to clamp down on some things?
Well, I think it depends on the influence that he gets from these safety advocate groups, which he will. I mean, if you look at the history, the last administration tried to get rid of regulations and some red tape. Does the Biden administration fully believe in government control and big government? If they believe in big government, we're going to see regulations. More regulations. So.
Well, I liked what happened in September with some of the hours of service in the FMCSA. You know, allowing a driver to take that 30-minute break while they're getting loaded and unloaded is vital. I mean, that saves a lot of time and helps with the bottom line. So good changes like that, I think all would welcome. Speaking of that, maybe we'll see an infrastructure plan, huh? Get some of these roads and bridges updated.
Well, I sure hope so. We've got to figure out how to fund it, but yes, yeah, it's got to happen. We've been talking about it for years, so it has to happen. Now, here's an interesting question, and I don't have the answer, so I probably shouldn't ask it. So if we get into a post-COVID era that we have 25% less cars on the road, let's say the trucks are stable.
Yeah.
Are we going to need all the concrete we need now?
There could be an evolution.
We need 2 lanes instead of 3. Will we need 3 instead of 4? What's that going to do to the planning in the future?
Yeah, telecommuting is here to stay. I tend to agree. I think there's going to be a lot more people. Why do we need this 10,000 square foot office space in Minneapolis? We don't need it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Maybe they only need 5,000.
Yeah, home construction, I think, will increase. Yeah, commercial construction, I wouldn't invest in today. So,
yeah. Good.
I've got some friends who were heavily invested in that, and they're glad they're out of the business.
Good. Well, Skip, I think this has been a pretty good.
What else do you have?
I mean, I could talk to you all day, and I know you could talk to me all day too. But we got to remember the drivers are watching, the listeners are watching. I want to thank them for watching. I don't want to take too much of their time, but I've learned a lot talking to you already. You've always been a wealth of knowledge to me, and I've always appreciated your mentorship. And I want to thank you for helping me cut some teeth on whatever this is, brake check at Styer. So I'm very thankful for you joining me today.
Okay, well, very good.
All right.
Let me know
Thanks
how
all for.
Turns out.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll stop it there.